Well, good afternoon. I'm Sarah Wyant. I'm the editor and president of AgriPulse Communications, and I'd like to thank the Washington Post and Bear for sponsoring this portion of the event. I know we've had a lot of discussion so far about food systems and transformations, and I thought it would be really, really wonderful for you all to hear from somebody who is at the heart of any food system, and that is a farmer. So we have an 8th generation farmer here with us, Kyle Tom from Indiana, and he's here to share with you some of the different transformations that have occurred in his farming operation. But before we do that, and I know the lights might make this a little difficult, so you have to raise your hand high, I want to build on something that Marty even mentioned, because whenever we start talking about food systems and food and farm policy, I find it quite unique to discover how many people have actually tried to either grow a crop that you can eat or grow a crop that can be fed to chickens or hogs or cattle so that we can all have high quality protein. So if any of you in the room have done that, would you raise your hand?
Oh, quite a few.
Good mix. Excellent. Well, so you already have a head start on this, but one of the things that I found interesting as Kyle and I were having our discussions is just how much transformation has already taken place in agriculture, especially between our generations. I'd like to be his generation, but let's face it, I got a couple of decades on him or so. And when I grew up on a farm in eastern Iowa, we had a lot different experience. My dad didn't have even a cab on his tractor or his combine, so there's a lot of sweat, there's a lot of dust. I have less than fond memories of some summers with my brother and 2 sisters with a hoe and a corn knife trying to hack weeds out of a soybean field. And our livestock certainly weren't in climate-controlled sorts of facilities. And so, heaven forbid, there's a day like today when it's so incredibly hot outside or a blizzard that might show up. And I travel around the country a lot, and so I'm blessed to see the different advances that have been made in farming and how technology, like this is a friend of mine in Iowa, Mark Jackson, who is planting his soybeans into a rye cover crop. We're seeing a lot of different changes. And so what I'd like to do is show you about the time that Kyle was starting farming. He just has an incredible photo that his folks found not too long ago. Just a cute little blonde there.
Back when? Yeah, get a picture of that.
He had hair, and his dad, to my folks' envy, had a cab on his tractor. So you were starting out then, and Kyle, just tell our group about how technology has changed in your career.
Well, if you look at where we came from and where we're going to in the future, yeah, like Sarah said, cabs weren't exactly prominent in the era of the 40s and 50s, finally got into the 60s. And now we have tractors that actually drive themselves. We have planters that can actually detect the soil and will put the correct seed into the soil approximately 1.5 to 2 inches just to find that right watermark and the right density of the soil. So when we're building all of our algorithms to determine the best placement of the seed and of the fertilizers, we're looking at all these different advancements. We're doing soil testing and whatnot. So we're looking at 13 different levels, and we're building our algorithms accordingly so we can inject those into the tractor software, and the tractor automatically, by itself, no touching of anybody, will automatically put it into the ground. And where we used to have to go 4.5 miles an hour, we now have high-speed planters. We can run 10 miles an hour, and that is unheard of, and it puts in the seed exactly where it needs to be. It needs to be about 6 to 8 inches away from each other. That way the roots get to the soil and they're not competing against each other. So it is spot on, and when everybody talks about, well, we're doing this per acre, well, what we look at Tom Farms is per inch. So we're very technology proficient in what we're doing.
And that's just an amazing change that we've seen in the last couple of decades. So there's a photo that you can see of the operation, and then this is Kyle driving in his tractor part of the time because it's so automated. But it's, you know, the technology is so advanced now. It's almost like you're a space-age food pilot out there. Tell us, how many acres can you plant of corn and soybeans in a day?
Well, on average, it takes 21 days for our farming operation to plant an entire crop. This year, with the rain that we had, it took 37. But on average, we can plant anywhere from 1,300 to 1,400 acres of corn a day, and roughly about 600 to 700 acres of soybeans. So we try to get things done very quick, very efficiently, so we have minimal downtime. But like you said, according to the weather, it doesn't always work out.
And certainly this was a year for the record books in terms of strange weather, a lot of moisture that you faced there. Do you think people understand that farming is really a business now and not just a lifestyle?
Well, I wish I could say it's a lifestyle, but it's not. It's a business right now. And what we're looking at, I'm looking at my 3 boys that are wanting to come back to the farm, the next generation, you know, that 9th generation to come back. You know, we have to look at, we are no different than, say, the Washington Post. It changes constantly. The technology in advertisement or in advertising changes constantly. So why shouldn't farming and the technology in farming change as well?
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about their application of not only seeds, nutrients, and crop protection chemicals, how that has changed. As you mentioned, it's not really an acre. It's such a minute amount. So many people, I think, overestimate what's really happening. Okay,
so we do put chemicals on the ground, on the plants. Bear Crop Science, they have a chemical called Stratego Yield. It's a fungicide. It takes 2 ounces per acre. Can you imagine that? You think of your 16-ounce drink. Imagine spreading that over an acre, how minimal that is. So, you know, we as farmers are not dousing chemicals or dousing these plants in chemicals. You know, we do farm GMOs at Tom Farms, but there are so many different farmers out there that are non-GMO, that are all organic. We need them as well to help grow and feed this growing world.
And you also shared with us some photos of different varieties of corn that you have raised, both those that are non-GMO versus GMO. Right. Tell us a little bit about why you see advantages in genetic modification. That, as Marty pointed out, has been going on for years with less technology.
Right. So if you look back into the 50s and 60s, you know, if you said you had 70 bushel yield, that was almost unheard of. Now we're pushing the envelope due to GMOs. We're pushing 300 to 350 bushels per yield or per acre for the yield, and that's what we get paid on is per yield, and so we want the biggest ear of corn, and on 40,000 population plants per acre. So because that's what we get paid on, we are looking for the biggest ear. And so if you farm a non-GMO product or a organic product, most likely the ear is not going to be near as large. And so there is a market out there for it, but where we're at in Indiana, there's no market.
Well, certainly there's trade-offs. I think some of the previous speakers mentioned that between price and yield and what you can get from unique crops versus others. But it does come down to being economically sustainable in order to be sustainable in a lot of other ways. Tell us a little bit about how federal regulations have impacted your ability to not only access these new technologies, but to move ahead with advancements on your operation.
Okay, so if you look at Bayer, they invest a little bit less than $2 billion per year on R&D. Monsanto does right at $2 billion. If you take all of the R&D in the agriculture business, in the agriculture sector, that's still less than Samsung does globally. And so it takes 10 years from thought to conception. So to birth of 10 years of, for that product to come out, if it gets approved worldwide. There's 500 different regulatory agencies that have to approve of a single gene to be signed off, and for us as farmers to use it, so we can then feed, clothe, and fuel the world.
And that's an immense, because it's not just in the United States where you need regulatory approval,
Correct.
right? All these other countries around the globe, and as we found, they don't always do it at the same time.
Correct.
So I think it's been interesting to see just the changes that you've made, and for everybody to appreciate that we should be thanking not only those of you who are growing your own food, but thanking farmers like Kyle every day, and appreciating the fact that there have been great transformations in U.S. and global agriculture. So thank you, Kyle, for your time, and it's our time now to turn it back over to the Washington Post for the next panel discussion.
Thank you.
you.